Hello everyone, welcome to the tutorial on the C programming language. This is our fifth lecture in which we will discuss different type of the programming language. So these are the outline of our lecture. First we will discuss about the programming language and what is the computer, which language understood by a computers, different type of the programming language is a low level language, high level language. Then we will discuss about the machine language and the assembly language, then the translator like a compiler and interpreter, and then we will discuss about the difference between compiler and interpreter. We had already discussed about the programming language. Let's have a quick revision. As we know that to solve a particular problem, algorithm is a set of the steps that can be followed to solve the problem. So there are two ways to express your algorithm. One is a flowchart, that is the diagrammatic representation of your algorithm, as well as the pseudocode, that is nothing but the English like a language. So there is a programmer that will translate this set of the steps into a program that is nothing but the set of the instruction that can understood by a computer. So the language that understood by a computer, that is known as the programming language. Okay, now there is one question arise. What is the language that can be understood by a computer? In order to understand that, we have to look into at the computer. That means we will discuss what is the computer. As we already know that computer is a machine that will accept the data as an input, then process your data, and according to that it will give you an output. To get the data as an input, there are input devices like a mouse, keyboard, scanner, joystick, mic, webcam, etc. Then as a processor, there is a central processing unit that perform all the arithmetic and logical operations, and the output at the end you will get the output that will be displayed on a monitor as well as printer. So let's discuss the detailed diagram of the computer. So this is the detailed diagram of the computers. There are input devices and output devices that are responsible for taking an input from the users and giving an output to the users. This is the central part of any computers that will handle the processing of your data. This is the actual part of the computer that will take the input, process your data, and give you an output. Typically, we can call a computer how to solve a problem by giving a sequence of the steps that will be remembered by a secondary memory in a computer. So this part is nothing but the electronic device that known as a machine that is only understood 0 and 1. That is known as the machine language. So we can say that the computer is nothing but the electronic machine that only knows 0 and 1. Why only 0 and 1? Because computer is a collection of the switches, and switches have only a two state as is on and off. So we can represent it as a 0 and 1, and these 0 and 1s are known as the binary number system. Let's discuss about the different type of the programming language. There are mainly two type of the programming language. One is the low level language and another is the high level language. Low level language can be as a machine language and assembly language that understood by a computer, and the high level languages like Fortran, C, Pascal, Java, Python, Ruby, Perl, etc. This figure shows the computer language and its type. Hardware is connected with the machine language because hardware is nothing but the collection of the switches that can be represented in on and off state. So the machine language are nothing but the collection of 0 and 1. Then there are some assembly language, and upper layer you will get the high level language like a Fortran, C, Pascal, Java, etc. Now let's discuss about the low level language and high level language in a detail. Starting with the low level language. Low level language is nothing but the statement or instruction that is directly translated into a single machine code, and this language is dependent on a machine. So a particular low level language works only for a certain type of the machine. It's differ from a 16 to 32 to a 64-bit machine. There are two types of the low level language. First is the machine level language and another is the assembly language. First we will discuss about the machine level language. a language that a computer actually understands. That means the collection of 0 and 1. So machine level language is a sequence of the instructions written in a form of the binary number that consists ones and zeros. It executes fast as a computer doesn't need any translation. Suppose there are two persons, they communicate with each other. If both persons know the same language, then there is going to be easy to communicate with each other. So same way, if you are writing your program in form of 0 and 1, so we do not need to translate it into any other form, because computer easily understood the meaning of 0 and 1. So it will execute your program as fast as compared to any other programming language. Okay, let's take one example. Suppose we want to give an instruction to a computer to add a two number like 3 plus 6. So we need to translate each and every instruction into a binary form. So 11 is a binary representation of a 3. A 110 is a binary representation of a 6. And there are some machine code that is reserved for an operation like a plus, that is the addition. So you have to instruct a computer with these numbers. So it is difficult for a programmer to remember these instructions. Okay, let's discuss about the pros and cons of the machine level language. As we know that we are writing a code in 0 and 1. So it directly understood by a machine. So it's directly start its execution. So it will take a less amount of time for execution, because we are not translating our program into any other language. But for a user it is difficult to use. Suppose we are getting one file having only a 0 and 1. So it is difficult for a human to understand the program, but computer will easily understood the program. Again, the machine level language is machine dependent. That means one file will be executed in a 16, 32 and 64-bit machine in a different level, and it will going to very difficult to debug and modify the code. That are the disadvantages of the machine level language. Now let's discuss about the assembly language. As we already discussed about the machine language, that for a human it is going to difficult to remember the machine code. So in the assembly language there are a symbolic representation of the machine code. This language is close to a machine code, but the computer cannot understand that language. So we need one translator that translate this symbolic representation into a machine code that can be understood by a computer, and this translator is known as the assembler. Let's take a same example. Suppose we want to add a 3 plus 6. So 6. So there are some symbolic representation for addition. So instead of this machine code, there are some instruction ADD, that is a symbolic representation of that machine code, and it will add these two number. So be compared to machine language, for a human it is going to easy to understood this instruction. And let's discuss about some examples of the instructions for assembly language. There are lots of instructions that is used in assembly language, like add, subtraction, INR for an increment, DCR for a decrement, CMP for a compare, and etc. There are lots of these instructions that will be used in assembly language. So for an assembly language, it is relatively easy for writing a program, but it is slow in execution, because we need to convert this assembly code into a machine language before execution. Okay, so let's discuss some advantages and disadvantages of the assembly language. As we know that it is a more convenient than the machine language because of the symbolic instructions, and it is also improve the readability, and we need a fewer code than a high level language. But there are some limitations, like it is hard to remember all the symbolic representations, less efficient than the machine language in terms of the executions, and again it is a machine dependent language. So next we will discuss the high level programming language. So let's discuss about the high-level programming language. A high-level programming language is user-friendly, similar to a natural languages, that is again a platform independent. for it is easy to write or remember and also easy to learn and work. While we will execute the high level program, we need some translator that translate our high level program into assembly language, and then we will convert this assembly code into a machine language. So be compared to assembly language and machine language, when we will write a program in high level language, the execution of this program will be slow, but it is efficient for developing a program. There are lots of high level programming language like C, C++, Python, Java, etc. We will discuss C as a high-level programming language later on in our tutorial. These are the advantages and limitations of the high-level programming language. As we know, that it is easy to use and it is portable because of the platform independent, easy to debug and development. We can easily develop the software using a high-level programming language, but it's need a more execution time and need a translator that translate your high-level code into a machine code. So overall, we can define a programming language as a notational system for describing a computation in a machine readable and human readable form. Okay, next let's discuss about the compiler and interpreter. Compiler and interpreter both are a translator that translate your high level program into a machine readable program. There are some basic difference about the compiler and interpreter. Let's discuss in a detail. So as we know that the compiler is a translator that translates a high level source program into a machine readable program that is done by a software that is known as the compiler. So compiler will translate your source code into a machine language code that is known as the object code. During the process of translation, compiler read the source program statement wise and check for the syntax error. In case of any error, it will generate the error message. There are various languages that are using a compiler to translate their program like a C, C++, Java, Fortran, Pascal. Each language have their own compiler that translate that language into a machine readable language. So interpreter is also like a compiler. It also translates a code of high level language into a machine language, but the difference is that it translates and executes a program line by line, while the compiler will read entire program and then translate the entire program into a machine readable code. Each line is checked for a syntax error and then it will convert it into a machine language. These are the languages that will use the interpreter like a Perl, PHP, Python. It will read your program line by line and translate each line into a machine code, and if there is any error to a particular line, it will not execute the next line. So these are the basic difference between compiler and interpreter. So here I am giving the difference between compiler and interpreter. You can go through it, but remember the basic difference of compiler and interpreter. Compiler will read entire code and then it will translate your program into a machine code, while interpreter go a line by line. It will read a first line, then it will convert it into a machine code, and then it will go to a next line. These are the basic difference between compiler and interpreter. So during this lecture we had discussed about the different type of the programming language like a machine language, assembly language, and high level programming language, and we also discuss about the compiler and interpreter. Next we will discuss there are different steps to solve a particular problem using a programming language into our next lecture. Thank you.